Good morning. It's April 5th here in Seoul and also a very rainy Arbor day. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with Donald Trump's appearance in a Manhattan court. Donald Trump pleads not guilty to over 30 felony charges. He is now set to speak back at home in Mar-a-Lago in the coming minutes. Finland becomes the 31st nation to join NATO, doubling the length of member state borders with Russia. While Washington welcomes its newest ally, Moscow warns it will beef up its defense. Here in the nation, the president uses a veto power for the first time to reject a legislation mandating a government purchase of surplus rice. It's also the first to use a veto power by a South Korean leader in 7 years. An ex-American president faces a Manhattan court indicted with 34 felony counts. Donald Trump is accused of paying hush money and falsifying business records. To fill us in what these charges are and the latest developments regarding the historic case, our Kim Hyun-sing is on the line. So, Hyun-sing, let's start with the specifics of these charges.
Right. Thank you, Dami. Former U.S. President Donald Trump is accused of paying hush money to pipe down claims that could have hurt his chances at the polls during his presidential campaign back in 2016. And this includes payoffs made to two women, including adult film star Stormy Daniels, with whom he allegedly had extramarital sexual relations with and paid substantial amounts of money to keep their encounter under wraps. But let me be clear, Tommy. Hush money is not illegal. But what is illegal is Donald Trump's tinkering with his company's books because he logged these hush payments as legal fees, which falls as illegally falsifying business records under New York state law. And there are over 30 more cases where the grand jury of the County of New York has indicted Trump over accusations of falsifying records in the first degree, which means that he had intent to defraud and intent to conceal the commission of another crime. And all these charges are Class E felonies, meaning that each count carries a maximum prison sentence of 4 years. And if Trump is found guilty on all 34 counts, he could be facing up to 136 years behind bars. And Donald Trump pleaded not guilty, with his defense team claiming that he's being unjustly charged. Trump is seen as one of the most influential men in the U.S., not only as the former commander-in-chief, but also as a business mogul and a key player in real estate. He's also one of the most controversial. He's been mired in a string of scandals and faced an array of criminal investigations, but he has never been charged. In fact, no former American president has ever been criminally charged before him.
So, as widely expected, Trump did plead not guilty to all those charges. Then what is he saying about the situation at the moment?
Well, he's supposed to be addressing his most avid supporters shortly at his Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida, where he has invited about 500 of his most prominent supporters, including some of the most pro-Trump congressional Republicans. Ahead of his arraignment, however, Donald Trump remained defiant, calling the New York State court a kangaroo court and saying that this is not what America is supposed to be. And this story is obviously developing as we speak, so I'll be sure to bring you more updates in our later newscast. Back to you, Dami.
Thank you, Hyun-sing, for keeping us updated. Now, moving on, European leaders, including French President Emmanuel Macron and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, are heading to China for talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping. What for? After putting a sharp edge on China over the possibility of Beijing sending military aid to Russia for the Ukraine war. And discussion on human rights and trade are also on the agenda. Our Lee Seung-jae reports.
Both French President Emmanuel Macron and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen arrived in China on Wednesday. Their trip is part of a 3-day visit to hold talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping aimed at discussing Ukraine as well as trade and human rights issues. While experts don't expect any major outcome from the talks with Xi, the two European leaders are expected to push Beijing to limit their support for Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Others believe that the trip is just part of efforts to re-engage with China, with it being Macron's first to China since 2019 and von der Leyen's first as head of the European Union's executive arm. The trip also comes as von der Leyen expressed concerns over the EU's relations with China becoming more distant in recent years.
It is clear that our relations have become more distant and more difficult in the last few years. We've seen a very deliberate hardening of China's overall strategic posture for some time. And it has now been matched by a ratcheting up of increasingly assertive actions.
Meanwhile, President Macron is also expected to visit the Chinese city of Guangzhou. Macron is currently traveling with a group of over 50 CEOs, including French energy giant EDF, rail transport manufacturer Alstom, and European plane maker Airbus. Experts say Paris is trying to maintain and rebalance trade relations with Beijing. So the question remains, will the two European leaders be able to pressure China into limiting their support for Russia, while also calling for better trade relations? Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The Korea Hydro and Nuclear Power Corporation is reportedly facing some hurdles from the U.S. as it seeks to transfer nuclear technology to the Czech Republic. According to documents submitted by KHNP to the Federal District Court in Washington, D.C. on Tuesday, it had submitted a letter last December informing the U.S. Department of Environment of the export bid, a necessary step to export related technology under U.S. law. But the DOE, in reply, asked the company to submit the letter in cooperation with the U.S. company Westinghouse. Westinghouse helped KHNP during the early stages of its nuclear development, and the two are currently engulfed in a lawsuit over whether KHNP's nuclear technology should be subject to export controls by the U.S., which allow exports only to approved countries. KHNP said it will comply with the request. The South Korean government plans to expand the number of core strategic technologies for materials, parts, and equipment from 150 to 200. The country's first trade minister, Chung Young-jin, said on Wednesday that South Korea will also increase the number of leading companies that possess them to 200 companies by 2030. Those companies are given environment and employment deregulation, as well as tax credits for investment and acquisition of local and overseas firms that produce materials, parts, and equipment. Currently, 66 leading companies have core strategic technologies for materials, parts, and equipment. President Yoon Suk-yeol has used veto power for the first time to reject a legislation mandating a government purchase of surplus rice. Now, it's also the first use of veto power by a South Korean leader in 7 years. Our political correspondent Lee Si-hoo reports.
Rival lawmakers at the National Assembly questioned government officials on Tuesday, focusing on the economy this time. On the second day of the three-day interpellation, the Prime Minister and the Ministers of Finance, Agriculture, and Transport, among others, were in attendance. Lawmakers asked them questions involving the rising energy bills, low birth rate, and South Korea's economic relations with Japan. The key question of the day was on the recently passed revision of the Grain Management Act, which President Yoon Suk-yeol had vetoed earlier on Tuesday.
What was the main reason for the veto?
We think the law forcing the government to purchase surplus rice is not helpful to farmers or to our finances. Researchers say that purchasing surplus rice would lead to overproduction, which would eventually lead to a fall in price.
The opposition, which last month pushed for the passing of the bill, called for better treatment of the farming industry.
I think the government should treat our agricultural industry well. It's helped our economy become the 8th largest in the world. What do you think?
I completely agree with the agricultural sector's contribution to South Korea's economic advancement, but the problem is the agricultural environment is rapidly changing. Demand is decreasing, and I think it's time we employ policies that suit the needs of farmers.
The revised Grain Management Act calls on the government to buy surplus rice if demand falls short of production by 3 to 5%, or if prices fall by 5 to 8% or more from the year prior. Now, this is the first time that President Yoon exercised his veto power, and also the first time the executive right was used since 2016. The vetoed act will now be put to a vote once again at the National Assembly. For it to pass, it requires over 2/3 of the votes of at least half of the parliament's lawmakers in attendance. If passed, the government has to accept the bill. But considering how 115 out of 299 lawmakers are part of the ruling People Power Party, making up over 1/3 of the parliament, it's widely expected that the bill will not pass the assembly this time. 이시후, Arirang News.
The South Korean government and the ruling People Power Party last week agreed to temporarily put off raising electricity and gas bills, a huge relief for households who have been battered by soaring bills in the past few months. But rate hikes are reportedly inevitable. For more on the issue, we're joined by Professor Kim Se-won. He's an economics professor at Ewha Women's University here in Seoul. Welcome back to the program, Professor.
Good morning.
Good morning. First off, what are the reasons behind the temporary postponement on electricity and gas rate hikes?
A quick answer to the question is because higher energy bill gives a big burden to general households, and also because it is more important than energy companies' business losses. Utility bills rose almost 28% on year last month, the highest among all sectors, and 6 times the 4.8% inflation. Given this situation, Korean government is taking longer than expected to announce new electricity and gas bills for the second quarter. The delay comes amid calls by politicians and the public to ease the burden of rising energy prices, even as public utility companies suffer mountain losses from artificially low rates. Mm-hmm. Since KEPCO and gas corporations' business losses can't be continued in the longer term, however, government will raise energy bills sometime in the second half of this year.
Right, then let's delve deeper into the issue. What happens if Korea Electric Power Corporation and Korea Gas Corporation fail to raise the price of gas and energy? What will happen next?
That is a very important question under this complicated situation. Mounting losses by public electricity and gas corporations are a big burden to Korean government too. Their losses should be compensated by government budget in the end, because these companies are owned and operated by Korean government. KEPCO's loss was over 32 trillion won last year, all-time high, while Korean gas corporations not received money from gas buyers, which is company's loss neared 9 trillion won. Last year. The losses of these public companies will be financed through companies' bonds, and Korean Congress gave more room to sell more bonds to these companies. So energy companies' losses can give shocks to domestic bond market because these public companies' credits are simply the best in the market, and therefore private companies' bond sales will shrink in the end.
Right. It's a burden for both households and those corporations. But how long will these energy price hikes be put off? It's been postponed temporarily, but when will the government eventually go ahead with the raise?
As we talked about, energy bill would be raised in the second half of this year when Korean government hopefully relatively recovers. Actually, until the end of February, the Korean government believed that energy rate adjustment could be inevitable in the first half of this year. But still, higher inflation and declining domestic consumption enforced government to delay energy bill raise. Thanks to negative impacts of higher business losses of public energy companies, there is a strong voice that electricity and gas bills needs to be rationalized very soon. But it needs to be noted that there should be something support or aids for vulnerable groups like low-income households when energy bill increases.
Right. Briefly, Energy bills have always been a headache for South Korean households. But what is the energy bill situation like in other countries? Please do share with us one example that is noticeably different from South Korea. How are other countries managing or keeping gas and energy bills under control?
European countries are the most suffering from higher energy bills rise in the last 2 years. We say that unexpectedly warm weather in last winter saved Europeans because in some countries, households were about to borrow money from banks to pay skyrocketed energy bills. The annual energy inflation rate exceeded 40% last year in Europe, and then prices began to fall gradually. In last month's energy inflation was about 20% in European countries. However, many households and businesses still struggle with the cost of the energy. European governments have allocated significant support to households and businesses to mitigate the impact of larger energy bills in the middle of overall energy cost crisis. Among European countries, Hungary, Germany, and UK are the most suffering from higher energy bills of electric power and gas.
Right. It sounds like it's a burden for many countries, not just South Korea at the moment, though there are variables like climate change and the warmer weather affecting the situation.
That's true.
Right. Yep. Thank you, Professor Kim, for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me today.
Day one in Busan for the inspection team tasked with choosing the winning bid for the World Expo 2030, as they were met by warm greetings by Busan citizens. And today, the delegation will head to the proposed main expo venue, the Busan North Port. Our Shinse-byuk has more.
The on-site three-day inspection in Busan has begun. An 8-member delegation from the Bureau International des Expositions arrived in the city on Tuesday and received a warm welcome from approximately 5,000 citizens in front of Busan Station. They were also greeted by different kinds of performances, including a demonstration of Korea's traditional percussion music, samulnori. During their 3-day stay, the inspection team will visit the proposed venues and landmarks and meet with city leaders and citizens. On their first day, the team visits Ulsukdo Ecological Park, followed by a bid presentation and a dinner hosted by the Busan mayor. On Wednesday, the delegation is set to visit Busan North Port, the proposed main expo venue. Later in the day, they will attend a K-Culture Night concert. The final day, which falls on Thursday, will consist of a final presentation, a visit to the UN Memorial Cemetery, and lunch with international students in Busan. The delegation will be leaving South Korea on Friday, marking the end of their month-long trip to the bidding countries. The team will then make a report based on its 6-day trip to South Korea. The report will include a comprehensive assessment of Busan, including the qualities of the venues, conditions of local public transportation, and Korea's financing plans to support the event. The report for the 4 bidding cities, Korea's Busan, Saudi Arabia's Riyadh, Italy's Rome, and Ukraine's Odessa, will be made available to the 171 BIE member states during the June General Assembly before voting for a winner in November. Shinse-byuk, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Matthew Ashley, and we now turn over to stories from around the world. We begin in Brussels, as NATO has officially welcomed Finland as its 31st member. During a ceremony at NATO headquarters on Tuesday, Finland's flag was unfurled among those of fellow members of the military alliance. The ceremony fell on the same day as the organization's 74th founding anniversary. It means that NATO has doubled its frontier with Russia, as Finland and its neighbor share a border 1,300 kilometers long. It also means that Finland has now abandoned its 7 decades of military non-alignment. In response, US President Joe Biden issued a statement congratulating Finland and called for NATO members Türkiye and Hungary to quickly conclude the ratification processes that would allow Sweden to join as well. It also drew positive responses from Ukraine and the United Kingdom. But the move has been met with backlash from Moscow, which has threatened countermeasures. Meanwhile, in the Indian Himalayas, at least 7 people have been killed and over a dozen injured following a major avalanche. Now, it took place Tuesday morning local time near the Natula mountain pass in India's northeastern state of Sikkim. According to officials, the avalanche came after unseasonal rains and hit a road where several vehicles were carrying tourists. Rescuers were able to pull 20 people out of the snow alive and saved 350 tourists and 80 vehicles that were stranded. It's still unclear what triggered the avalanche, which also came at an unusual time of the year. Over the past 2 years, the Indian Himalayas have seen an increased number of such events, which have killed at least 120 people. Meanwhile, a 2018 study says that the region is at an increased risk for avalanches due to climate change. Turning over to Türkiye now, almost 2 months after the devastating earthquakes that struck the country and neighboring Syria, a mother and her baby daughter have finally been reunited. They were brought together at a hospital in the city of Adana on Monday after DNA testing confirmed they were related. They were separated during the February 6th earthquakes that hit their home in the province of Hatay. The baby girl has been called a miracle baby after she was pulled out of the rubble 5 days later with no injuries. However, her 2 brothers and father were among the 56,000 people killed by the earthquake and subsequent tremors across Türkiye and Syria. And finally, the cryptocurrency Dogecoin has seen its price surge after Twitter switched its iconic bluebird logo to the image used by the popular virtual coin, a Shiba Inu dog. Now, after Twitter made the change on Monday, the price of Dogecoin rose more than 30% in 3 hours. Musk is a known supporter of cryptocurrencies and has advocated for both Dogecoin and Bitcoin. Twitter has declined to say whether the logo change will stay. The logo change comes after Musk on Friday asked a U.S. judge to dismiss a $258 billion lawsuit that accuses him and his electric car company Tesla of running a pyramid scheme to support Dogecoin.
Good morning. Today is Arbor Day and also Cheongmyeong, the 5th spring term out of 6. It surely has been a rough spring for plants and trees this year, with a lack of rain amid a warming trend. Welcome rain is soaking the ground nationwide with heavier rain on Jeju and the south coast this morning. So the south coast and Jeju could see more than 100 millimeters of rain, with 20 to 30 millimeters of rain an hour to pound down in those areas. Meanwhile, the rest of the country will see 10 to 80 millimeters of rainfall until Thursday afternoon. Heavy rain alerts are in place for Jeju, and the strong wind advisor has also been issued on Jeju and the west coast for what will be a tough day for those on Jeju Island. So if you are flying in and out from the resort island, check your flight schedules in case of any cancellations. Morning temperatures are still above norms, while highs will be returning to norms this afternoon and will be breezier tomorrow. Afternoon highs in Seoul and Gwangju will be at 16 degrees Celsius. Daegu, Gyeongju, Daejeon, Busan all topping out at 17 degrees. It's slippery out there, so stay safe on the roads today. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That wraps up today's A New Day at Arirang. Do stay with us for more updates throughout the day. Thanks for watching.
Dear world citizens, see you in Busan in 2030. Busan is the most beautiful city, rich in culture, rich in all the best technologies, and rich in historical heritages around Busan, connected by all means of transport, including air, train, roads, and marine transportation. Don't miss the best opportunity, which will work as a permanent reminder on your mind that you really will have enjoyed the best memories in your life.
Lotte takes a new leap beyond its boundaries. Our change will lead to better lives for all. New Lotte, the power of a better world. New today, better tomorrow. Lotte.
We're here to make a new type of news.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's April 5th here in Seoul. I'm Shin Yoon, and this is News Generation, where we make the news at Arirang's very own open studio. Every morning, we'll discuss the top issues and latest current affairs affecting people in their 20s and 30s. Joining me in the studio is Kim Xiang.
Good morning, Yam.
And Cheska Dainong.
Happy Arbor Day!
Happy Arbor Day! And both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. Now, we're going to start with the news feed, and the news feed covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. And we'd like to start with Dogecoin. Dogecoin's value jumped 30% once Twitter changed its iconic bird logo to a Shiba Inu, a symbol often associated with the coin. An image of a dog featured in viral memes was uploaded, allegedly as a part of a late April Fool's Day gag from the company's owner, Elon Musk. Currently, the billionaire is being accused of engaging in a pyramid scheme by promoting Dogecoin. And the second is J.K. Rowling's legendary Harry Potter book series, which could be made into a TV series. Bloomberg reported that Warner Bros. Discovery is looking to close a deal so that a TV season would be made from one of the books. Under the deal, Rowling would still have a major say to how it would be created, so our attention is geared there. And the legendary Korean trot singer Hyunmi died on Tuesday at the age of 85. The president of her fan club found her dead at her home, and police are still investigating the cause of her death. Hyunmi started her career by joining the U.S. Army Band in 1957 and has since become one of South Korea's most renowned singers. Now, let's now pay respects to the late Hyunmi by listening to the song that placed her towards the Hall of Fame. It's her 1962 release, Night Fog. Take a listen. So that was Hyunmi's Night Fog, and many were very shocked to lose such legendary singer. And Cheska, I think you were quite shocked with the news as well. Were you a big fan of her?
I know she was definitely beloved by my grandparents' generation, and I know she touched the heart of many Koreans, as you can tell by the, the emotion in the song. And I would also say that she's probably the pioneer of K-pop.
Definitely.
And it is legends like her that really helped us get to where we are today in terms of our culture. So may she rest in peace.
May she rest in peace. And Xiong, I remember we were having lunch with our teammates when we heard the news, and you were quite shocked as well.
I was very shocked. I mean, as Cheska mentioned, but most of the Korean population do know about Hyunmi. A lot of her songs featured in films as well as different entertainment, drama series and things like that. And Hyunmi actually debuted as a singer in 1957, so it's been quite a while, at the age of 20 as well. She, I think, also, as Cheska mentioned rightfully, maybe not K-pop, but I think the jazz pop genre was definitely created and led by artists like Hyunmi, who you can see from the iconic sort of husky voice as well, really sort of calming, and you could hear the development of the jazzy sort of instrumentals as well, which really marked a bit of a landmark in Korean music industry as well.
And she will remain a legend, and may she rest in peace. That was our news feed for this Wednesday. Now, moving on, April 5th is Arbor Day in Korea. It's a day encouraging people to plant more trees in order to tackle climate change. In light of this, let's see how much our generation values environmental issues. Did you know that around 65% of millennials and Gen Z in Korea would choose to buy a product based on whether it's environmentally friendly instead of its price? Last year, the Korea Chamber of Commerce and Industry did a survey on 380 young people. 6 out of 10 said they preferred ethical businesses that uphold environmental, social, and governance values. This survey is just one of the many indicators that show how invested the next generation is towards saving the planet. Today, News Gen looks at 3 questions. 1. What are some key environmental issues the new gen in Korea want to tackle? 2. How far has Korea come in terms of dealing with climate change? 3. What can we do more to save the environment? So today is Arbor Day, a day we commit to planting more trees. And recently, we've been seeing more and more people shed light on various environmental issues, and that's partly due to a lot of natural disasters or abnormal temperatures. So here in the studio, what are some issues that caught your attention?
I mean, definitely for me, air and water pollution, because let's face it, those two are the essential elements that we can't practically live without.
Right. Very tangible ones as well. You can feel it on our skin.
Exactly. And the golden time for breathing is 4 minutes. So basically, if we don't breathe for 4 minutes, we're gone. There's nothing we can do. And in 2018, OECD ranked us as having the worst air quality among top 35 rich countries. And as many Koreans know, we do have the yellow fine dust that blows from China and the desert. But also there are some problems in South Korea that also exacerbates this air quality issue as well.
Right. And what breaks my heart is when you see elementary school students who should be going out to like playgrounds and playing, but they always have their masks on.
Even without COVID, you know,
I know,
we've
with
been
COVID,
seeing that the past few years.
But with no mask mandates, they're still having them on because of this really bad air quality. But Xiang, what are some issues that caught your attention these days?
I mean, I think I'll focus on the more recent issue. And so not only pollution, but real environmental threats are happening near us as well. A fire broke out last Sunday morning, 2nd of April, on Mount Inwang, a popular hiking destination in Seoul's Jongno district. Around 120 households were evacuated, but no deaths or injuries were reported. Actually. And Korea Forest Service also reported that they have been containing forest fires across Chungcheong province, south of Seoul, which started over the weekend as well. So more than 60 homes and buildings were damaged by fire, and at least 236 people were evacuated in Hongsang County. So, I mean, to be honest, we can see there's a bit of rainfall today, and it's quite a blessing that on Arbor Day we're seeing such heavy rain, which will definitely help with the situation of the forest fire around the country.
Definitely, because up till yesterday, we've been seeing around like 20 different fires. Exactly, officials were trying to get them out. But Xiang, why do you think a growing number of the new generation are interested in environmental issues?
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a few reasons. First would be sort of increased awareness, stemming from the widespread availability of information, often from the internet, including social media, having different environmental campaigns everywhere, and promoting environmental activism. So also many schools and universities now also include environmental education in their curriculum as the basis, as well as corporates focusing on CSR guidelines to increase responsibility of their actions as well. But first and foremost, I think the sense of responsibility to ensure habitable planet for the future generations, as we can now experience firsthand the visible and tangible effects of environment change, seeing from the water pollution, the air pollution and things like that. I think that being on our skin, we can really want to, the new generation really wants to change that and make a better planet for the coming generations.
Water levels are also rising as well. We're seeing so many different natural disasters almost hitting us. So it's not only for the next generation, it's also about the survival of our current generation. So why don't we now hear from an environmental activist to see what other main issues there are and find out more on how we can better save the environment? So climate change seems to be speeding up, and how do we know? Well, have you ever heard about this quote before? Take a look at the screen. So the quote says, "If the bee disappeared off the face of the earth, man would only have 4 years left to live." Have you guys ever heard about this quote?
I actually have
Wasn't
not.
It possibly Einstein's?
I know. A lot of people actually attribute this quote to Albert Einstein, who often talked about colony collapse disaster. And this was a mysterious disease that swept through the United States and European honeybee hives. And ecologists say there's actually no evidence whether Einstein was the one who said it, but the quote itself does have some weight, and that's because bees are major pollinators and plants need them to survive and thrive. That is why we have a biodiversity campaigner at Greenpeace who's also interested in saving more bees. It's Che Taeyong, who also works to expand better environment for bees. Welcome, Taeyong.
Hello, nice to meet you.
Good morning, Taeyong.
All right, Taeyong, so how much do you agree to the quote we just talked about? Without bees, mankind would only have 4 years left to live.
Definitely agree with that statement. Even though there's no hard evidence that Einstein ever said that, unlike many people believe. But many researchers consider the statement itself to be very true. Bees are one of the most important pollinators on Earth, not only maintaining our ecosystem, but also our food supply. UN FAO estimates that out of some 100 crop species, which provide 90% of food worldwide, 71 are bee-pollinated. Among them, there are vegetables and fruits including apples, almonds, blueberries, and more. Not only them, but even meat can also be scarce too, as the main feed of cow consists of alfalfa, which is also bee-pollinated. Sadly, those pollinators, including bees, are decreasing globally right now, and the damage is becoming visible to us. Therefore, to avoid the worst-case scenario, which is that bees are extinct so mankind would be in danger, we have to act now.
Yeah, I mean, interesting with what you're saying, Taeyong. I think we're also looking at sort of high-tech alternatives for bees as well. I've heard news about mechanical bees being invented to carry out the pollinating process instead of organic bees. I mean, do you have any opinions on alternative, sort of technological alternatives that exist for these environmental measures?
Well, as far as I know, the alternative ways is not yet developed enough to alter this natural bees pollination power.
So we would definitely have to focus more on expanding their, saving them a bit more. And I think that has to do with the type of campaigns you do for Greenpeace, right? So anything you have in mind for today, with it being Arbor Day, can you explain to us what type of campaigns you do?
Well, first of all, let me tell you the problems in Korea about the bees.
All right.
Well, there are several reasons why bees are disappearing in Korea. Not only varroa mites, which are the parasites of bees, but also climate change, pesticides issues, and last but not least, the lack of honey plants. And yet, the Ministry of Agriculture, which controls the honeybee issues as the honeybees are classified as livestock, announced that the reason of current bee issues is due to the varroa mites. And the climate change is not a major cause of bees' disappearance. Not only that, they claim that there's no such impact on the ecosystem from bees' disappearance because wild bees can pollinate instead of honeybees, and artificial pollination can be conducted too. We, the Greenpeace Seoul office, issued a statement against the government, and we diagnosed these issues as the Korean government considers bees as honey-producing livestock, not as pollinator, which protects and sustains the ecosystem. Also, bees in Korea, including wild bees, are in grave danger, and yet the Korean government does not consider this issue as a crisis, so does not present any effective policy.
I see.
Under this diagnosis, we asked the government to establish the Bee Saving Committee under the Prime Minister, so not only the Ministry of Agriculture, but also the Ministry of Environment, Korea Forest Service, and many more ministries can manage the bee issues and provide a better environment for bees constantly. To make this happen, we're gathering petitions from the public by delivering the fact that bees are imperative for a sustainable ecosystem and food supply. While doing so, we're also delivering our suggestion to government in form of statements, letters, and other activities. Well, under this circumstance, Arbor Day is very important to bees in Korea, as they are in dire need of more honey plants. Honey plants are trees or flowers which can provide nectar and pollen to bees. If there are more honey plants, bees can provide it with valuable nutrients such as carbohydrates and protein, which are important for building up bees' immune systems and enlarging their lifespan. However,
and I think that's very important. We do need to find more ways to spread more information about the importance of bees. But I think on a personal level here in the studio, we're curious as to how we can tackle climate change. Do you have any suggestions?
Well, personally, individual efforts such as saving more electricity and avoiding using plastic are also important, but that kind of effort itself cannot cope with this climate change issue 100%. Well, we need a transition of the power system from fossil fuels to renewable energy to minimize carbon emissions, and we also need to preserve more ecosystems, including the Amazon, which can absorb more carbon dioxide. To do so, we need to constantly demand that the government and corporations be responsible so that the global temperature does not rise by more than 1.5 degrees. And for the bees, we need to plant even more honey plants.
All right. Thank you so much, Taeyong. That was a very insightful discussion we had with you just now.
Thank you, Taeyong.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and Cheska, I think Taeyong made a lot of fascinating points right there. Any that really caught your attention?
I think he raised a very important point by pointing out that honeybees are actually considered a livestock, not just pollinators. And livestock basically has to do with the survival of how we live in this ecosystem, right? So I think he was very passionate. He made a plea for why it's so important to take care of this livestock that actually creates an ecosystem that we can safely survive and live long, basically.
Right, and I think our viewers have their own hacks on how to better save the environment. So if you take a look at the screen, you'll see some of our viewers and their comments on what type of environmental issues concern them and what they're doing to tackle them. So SV said, I'm concerned about medicine and hormones in our water supplies and oceans. Ocean acidification and acid rain. I manage an apple orchard. And Art said, fine dust, sea level rise, Fukushima water release, and these are some things that concern her. Brooke Parsons says, sustainable solutions for everyday life, convenient and easy to follow for busy working people. Now, let's swiftly move on to our discussion, though it's quite worthwhile to see many people changing little parts of their lives to save the environment. I think what's also very important is that climate change requires the government's help.
Absolutely.
Right? And so, Cheska, what are some efforts being made currently?
So from the public domain, government have definitely forced a lot of strict regulations, such as shutting down coal-fired plants and limiting the hours of operation on some sites that produce too much industrial dust. But on top of that, one thing that was very interesting was the government started employing high technology, using 5G robots and drones to patrol air quality. Now, the goal for next year is to reduce fine dust level by over 35%. And I truly hope that we reach that level, because there's so much going on in the air at the moment, and we would all like to breathe safely and happily.
You mentioned a very good point there, because the Science Ministry is trying to implement many different scientific advancements to save the environment. But Xiang, what are some other goals that the government has been setting so far?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with what Cheska said. There are a lot more things happening to achieve some of the goals that the government is pursuing. So what I think we should talk about the most recent policies and some of the goals that the Yoon government has unveiled. On the 21st of March, the Korean government unveiled a blueprint for achieving 2050 carbon neutrality and green growth. This is to achieve the NDC, short for Nationally Determined Contribution, by 2030, which is a target submitted every 5 years to the UNFCCC since the Paris Agreement. This blueprint presents greenhouse gas reduction policies for 10 major industrial sectors and 6 socio-economic areas. Now, let's have a look at the exact figures. You can see how far the South Korean government aims to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. The units used in this chart is 10,000 tons of CO2 equivalent, and the percentages depict emissions reduced compared to 2018 as the base year. The presidential office passed an enforcement decree in March last year to reduce GHG emissions to 40% lower than 2018, down to 436.6 million. By 2050, Korea aims to reach 100% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions as well.
And these are definitely good goals right there, but the talk of the town among climate activists is that they might not be too strong enough to, bring about better change, especially since the government lowered the amount of emissions compared to the previous administration, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the Presidential Committee on Green Growth and Carbon Neutrality actually continued from the previous government, Moon Jae-in's government, and they have definitely similar goals as well. I mean, they do have the same achievements. They do have what we call the NDC submitted to the Paris Agreement, the organizing committee. So we do have the similar goals and that we should be working forward to no matter what government we're under.
Right, but they were better hearing from corporations and trying to find more feasible ways so that, the goals may not be too hard to achieve. But you know what? Climate change is such a hard topic that we can do in our daily lives, and it should be done on a daily and in our personal lives as well.
Absolutely.
So I would like to ask you guys, do you guys think of any unique or unconventional ways we could tackle climate change, starting with you, Xiao?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a few. First of all, I mean, you could do simple things like changing to an energy-efficient LED light bulbs.
That's true.
But I think more niche objectives could be sort of investing in renewable and divest from fossil fuels as well.
Very true.
And you might think investing in these sectors might be a little difficult, but many countries also now operate local renewable energy co-ops as well, which you can join to create regional change. Investing in nuclear fusion instead of nuclear fission, which doesn't create any radioactive waste, could be a good idea. And things like, high-tech things like blockchain can also contribute to the transparency of, the carbon emissions of corporates as well as individuals to take more responsibility and make change for the better future.
Right, and speaking of data, I think, though it may be hard, one tip I have for you is stop using the internet. It might be too hard, but that
is so difficult, but true.
It is
true, yes.
Because the energy needed for like an email or like a simple internet search might not be too much in terms of like emission, but if it piles up, it can lead to a lot of major greenhouse gases. And studies show around 3.7% of global greenhouse emissions come from us using the internet, and this may double in 2 years' time. So this is my tip. But what about you, Cheska? Do you have any unconventional tips for us?
Yes, so apart from the high-tech campaigns that we have, I would like to provide a more hands-on approach.
All right.
So plogging is definitely a great one. Plogging, yes. So it's when you walk or jog in any beautiful places, beaches, parks, and you pick up trash on the way.
Oh, that's really nice.
It's a great workout because you move your body and you also engage with the environment. And another very interesting campaign that I'm particularly interested in is food waste. So I use dehydration machine, which is very cheap and makes the food waste very compact.
Right.
But also a campaign called the Inglorious Food and Veggies.
Right.
AKA the ugly food campaign.
I love that. What is it?
So it's a pun on a movie, but what it does is it recycles this discarded food waste, not food waste, food items that have been discarded because of its appearance, and they transform it into jams or smoothies, or even sell it at a lowered price so that people can actually use these perfectly good and tasty food.
And reduce waste.
Exactly.
All right, and saving the environment is directly related to us. Battling climate change is to do with survival. That's why it should be our top priority. And we'll be here every day from 9:30 a.m. to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you the topics that young people are talking about. Special thanks to Kim Xiao.
My pleasure.
And Cheska Dainha.
Pleasure's always mine. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are New
Generation.